My name is Emily Parker, and I'm a principal at the BerryDunn Not-for-Profit Practice Group.
And I'm Katie Balukas, and I'm a senior manager in the BerryDunn Not-for-Profit Practice Group.
Today, we have a special guest joining us for the podcast, BerryDunn's own Sarah Olson. Sarah, please say a few words to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me, Katie and Emily. I'm Sarah Olson. I am the Director of Executive Recruiting at BerryDunn and have been working to find outstanding C-suite talent for clients for over 20 years.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And I was thinking, really, just last week, I had my own 20-year anniversary at BerryDunn, and I was remembering that you were part of my initial hiring process. So the timing of this is really great for me as I think back to 20 years ago today. Though we invited you, yeah, it's fun. We invited you today to talk about what our not-for-profit clients are seeing in hiring and recruiting.
Yes, and certainly a lot of our clients are still struggling with attracting and retaining top talent as they have employees that are starting to retire or employees that move on to new employment opportunities. So what are you seeing in the industries?
Well, it's interesting. I'm working with a couple of not-for-profit clients right now. And, one of the struggles, I think, for any not-for-profit these days is attracting the kind of talent that they need, but they only have a certain budget to spend on that talent. And they're competing against for-profit organizations, which can be a struggle sometimes. So we're trying to get creative with our not-for-profits to figure out how do we get that talent in there? How do we express what the mission is of the organization that might speak to the right people? Sometimes it's not always about money. Sometimes it's about what is the mission of the organization and how can I, as an employee of that not-for-profit, add value and help my community in the way that the mission states.
That's really great. Some of my clients are looking to use a search firm, an executive search firm in this task because it is such a big project to find the right person. And really it can become, quite often it's a national search or at least a larger regional search. What questions do you wish or do you think boards should be asking as they're looking to hire an executive search provider?
Well, that's a great question, Emily, because there's lots of search firms out there, but they don't always have the ability to serve organizations, especially not-for-profits, well. Sometimes they don't understand the industry and what are the things they need to be looking at to really find that talent that's going to stick. So I think, some of the questions that should be asked by any of our clients or any non-for-profits is, what's the breadth of the experience of the recruiter? Salespeople will come forward and say, we've got plenty of candidates for you, but that isn't necessarily the case. They're just taking what we call a fishing trip to see if somebody's willing to use their services. So you really have to understand what's the experience of that recruiter. Salespeople will come in, sell the search, and then throw it to a junior recruiter who may know nothing about the not-for-profit industry. Another question is, how long has that recruiter been at the organization? Most large search firms have very high turnover rates because there's a lot of burnout. And are you going to be getting a recruiter that's only been there for a couple of months and really doesn't know the sort of the way of the world of finding talent? And what are the specific recruiting experience, that the recruiter might have? Do they understand the not-for-profit world? I think it's very different for-profit, and you really have to have some experience in that arena to be able to serve your clients well. What are the resources that are used to find candidates? Our not-for-profit organizations typically don't have those types of resources. They don't have access to people across, let's say, the LinkedIn platform. So recruiters do have that sort of ability to find talent that way. They can reach out to passive candidates. They have networks. They have databases of people. And so that way that they have more of a reach to find that talent. So those would be some of the few questions that you should be asking any search firm if you're approached.
That's all very helpful information. So, what are you seeing that job seekers are looking for these days when they're looking for a new role?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Katie, because the landscape of, searching for jobs has changed completely because of the pandemic. When the pandemic hit and we all had to go home, at first, I think some people were reticent to be at home and try to get their jobs done, but other people, most people embraced it. And they realized that they could work and be at home and serve their families, their pets, their spouses well, and still get the job done just as effectively. When the pandemic started to wind down, people really thought, why can't I just stay home and do my job? It's understandable. Organizations want people to come back into the office because they're paying a lot of money for space, but forcing people back into the workforce and to work into the office has made a lot of people think twice about where they want to be. So what we're seeing is a lot of job seekers looking for flexibility in where they can do their job. They're looking for places of employment where they have a voice, where they can bring, ideas and best practices, and meet the challenges of the organization and of the position, and looking for recognition. They want to be recognized appropriately, not just from a pay standpoint, but from a benefit standpoint, for the job that they do, and when they do good work and they go above and beyond the call of duty. So, I think organizations have to understand what is it job seekers are looking for and be able to meet them halfway. And I'm not saying, organizations just to completely abandon, their workforce planning and the way that they conduct their business, but think about what job seekers want these days in positions. And that will help them find that talent that they're looking for if they can be flexible in how people do their work these days.
I think that's really on point with what I'm seeing in my client base. When I think about some of the turnover that I've witnessed over the past handful of years, some of the things that have been pretty consistent, if it's hiring from a few states away, it might be elongating the transition time where the person actually has to move, because you can perform some of that work remotely. It allows people time to, instead of just immediately uprooting their entire families and moving them across the country, it allows them the time for a smooth transition. That really seems to have been successful in a few cases that I can think of.
Oh, absolutely, Emily. And just as a note on that, it's a way to retain talent as well. In our own organization, I know that there's been several people who have wanted to relocate to a different part of the country, but we really didn't want to lose them. So we said, hey, why not just work remotely and still stay with the firm? I think that's probably one of the best ways that you can think about keeping talent in your organization, and that's having the flexibility to allow them to work anywhere instead of losing them outright.
That's really great. And I know, Joe, our in-house tax host, would want me to say, be sure you're thinking about the different tax consequences of having employees in different states. And that's as far as we'll take the tax conversation without Joe on this podcast.
Right.
That could be its own podcast. It probably should be. So we'll put a pin in that one for another time. When I think about some of the different things that we're seeing nonprofits investigate offering as far as benefits, what job seekers are looking for. I'm thinking about things around new wellness programs, for example, opportunities for schedule flexibility, diversity, equity, inclusion programs, things like that. Have you seen any other sort of new either benefits or policies that you think have been really successful for organizations in keeping, attracting, and retaining talent?
Absolutely. And, the biggest one, as we've been talking about, Emily, really is that flexibility and allowing people to work hybrid schedules of work, off and at home. But I think it also has to do with mission for not-for-profits. What does the not-for-profit stand for? What's the community it serves? And many people are driven by that. And so I think And in fact, I was just talking to one of my clients last week about this. What is your mission was the question that I asked. Why would someone want to come and work here? What's your purpose? How will they feel fulfilled if they do their job to serve the community? And I think that's something that not-for-profits don't spend a lot of time around, usually because they don't have specific marketing departments. But it does pay to spend some time thinking about how do you brand yourself? How do you brand your mission in your not-for-profit organization so that people are compelled to want to be part of that, to serve their communities in the way that your organization does that. So I think that's a big piece, and I think not-for-profits need to spend a little bit more time thinking about that and maybe working with some outside consultants for a short period of time just to help them pull something together that's compelling.
And I know a few times in the conversation we've talked about remote work, and certainly I have many clients that have embraced the remote work model where they may have opportunities for staff to work either fully or a few days a week remote. Is that something that you're seeing across the board with all nonprofits, or is it impacting the executive search function in any way?
Well, I think when I talk to my clients, I do talk about this quite extensively, because if they are adamant about having someone in an office, what I let them know is that's going to limit the type of talent that will be drawn to the position. And that makes it a little bit harder for us to find those qualified people that they desperately need. So if they can build in some flexibility to where someone works, it just makes the search so much easier. But it does take some convincing. I'll go back to my client I was talking about last week. They have a gorgeous building in Maine here, and they have plenty of office space, and they would love to be able to fill it with people that work for them. But that's just not realistic anymore. And if they truly want that person that's going to deliver the value that they need to the position, then they really have to consider thinking about, having at least a hybrid schedule available to that talent in order to keep them. So.
Yes, and that's certainly something that's important to keep in mind, because I think companies that are embracing the remote work and companies that are allowing for that flexibility, it just opens up the door for so many more candidates just from outside of your geographical area, as opposed to really being limited to who's within driving distance of your physical location. Certainly that puts you behind if that is your mentality right from the beginning when you start the process.
Yeah, it's so true, Katie. Any recruiter out there right now will tell you that candidates that are seeking positions are seeking them primarily because they're being forced to go back in an office, and that is not what they want to do. And to your point, absolutely, it just makes the talent pool so much larger. And that's only to your advantage, so that you're able to get that right person coming into your organization that's really going to help you drive your business, your organization.
So in many cases, organizations do succession planning, or should be doing succession planning. There is an end date for their current executive from a retirement standpoint that's known fairly well in advance. So in the cases where you have that kind of forward notice, when do you think is the right time to start a search in general for an organization? What sort of runway would be best case scenario from your perspective?
Emily, that's such a great question. I have worked with so many clients that are in this situation. Actually, I worked with clients that, are in a panic mode because someone's leaving or retiring and they haven't done succession planning. And so we're scrambling to try to find someone. But for those companies that really think it through, which is to their advantage, they're able to start the search much earlier before, before the person leaves, and then get somebody in place, have that person train the person that's leaving, and then be able to, hit the ground running, and, it's seamless for the organization. It makes their life so much easier. I would say that typically, especially for an executive, you want to start at least 9 months before the person retires, because it's going to take time to find that replacement, because you want to make sure, especially on a C-suite type position, that it's the right person that you're getting. That level person, if they're wrong, they can be very disruptive if it's not the right fit. And so you want to make sure that you're diligent in your search and making sure you find that right talent. If you do that and you allow them to spend a little bit of time with the person before they leave, who's retiring, it's a win-win all the way around for the candidate, for the person retiring, and also specifically for the organization. So we say at least, each organization is a little bit different. Sometimes they need a long runway. Others need a short runway, depending on what the location is, what they're able to pay, the replacement. There's a number of factors that come into play, but it really pays to work with your search consultant to have that conversation, and they can help guide you in what that time frame should look like. And I've done that so many times with my clients, and it's really to their advantage to make it happen.
So don't wait until the 9 months before the known retirement date to start deciding if you're going to use a consultant and trying to find the one that works for you. And yeah, we start from the 9 months and start working backwards from there. That's really helpful to think about that runway. Well, Sarah, we really thank you so much for joining us today. I know we'll hear more from you in our not-for-profit quarterly insight newsletter that goes out. And I'm sure we'll invite you back on the podcast in the future.
Oh, that sounds great, Emily. It was my pleasure, and I would be happy to come back.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.